So here's the thing about the Galactic Intelligence Summit. It's basically the universe's most pretentious science fair, except instead of baking soda volcanoes, you've got species showing off how many dimensions they can calculate in simultaneously. And this year, lucky me, Earth got an invitation. Now, you'd think they'd send someone qualified, right? Someone with like 12 PhDs and a name that sounds impressive when you say it out loud. But no, Dr. Elena Vasquez, Earth's actual certified genius, decided to eat gas station sushi the night before departure. Food poisoning. The irony of humanity's smartest mind being taken down by questionable seafood was not lost on anyone, so they sent me instead. Jake Foster, mid-level engineer. My greatest achievement to date was fixing the coffee maker on Space Station Meridian using duct tape and what I'm pretty sure was spite. The summit was being held on Quantari Prime, which looked like someone had asked an AI to design the most aggressively intellectual planet possible. Everything was crystalline structures and floating geometric shapes. Even the trees were arranged in mathematically perfect spirals. It was the kind of place that made you feel dumb just by existing there. I walked into the Grand Symposium Hall, which was less of a hall and more of an architectural flex. The ceiling disappeared into some kind of infinity mirror situation that probably violated several laws of physics I didn't understand. Seated around this massive circular platform were representatives from about 40 different species, all looking deeply serious and important. And then there was Prime Logician Krell. Picture a 7-foot-tall praying mantis made of crystal who somehow learned how to look down his nose at you despite not technically having a nose. That was Krell. He spotted me immediately, and his facial sensors did this thing that I'm pretty sure was the Quantari equivalent of a condescending smile. "Ah," he said, his voice echoing through some kind of universal translator that made him sound like a particularly smug philosophy professor. "The human delegation has arrived." How delightful. The way he said delightful made it very clear he meant the exact opposite. "We were informed that Dr. Vasquez would be attending," Krell continued, those crystalline eyes scanning me up and down like I was a disappointing science experiment. "But I see Earth has sent, well, alternative representation." "Yeah, about that," I said, trying not to let his vibe get to me. Elena ate some bad sushi. "I'm Jake. I do, engineering stuff." "How charmingly simple," Krell said, and several other aliens made sounds that might have been their version of polite laughter. "Well, please, do take your designated seat. Try not to be overwhelmed by the proceedings. We understand that human cognitive capacity is still quite, shall we say, emergent." Emergent. That was a fancy way of calling us dumb. I found my seat between Ambassador, Thorquin, who looked like someone had crossbred a dragon with a linebacker, and Scholar Plix, an insectoid creature with way too many eyes who kept clicking their mandibles in what I hoped was a friendly way. "Don't let Krell bother you," Thorquin rumbled, his voice like grinding boulders. "The Quantari think they're superior to everyone. It's exhausting." "They do throw excellent summits, though," Plix chittered, adjusting their translation collar. "Very organized. Very symmetrical." I nodded, pulling out my datapad and settling in. This was going to be a long week. Krell waited for everyone to settle down with the patience of someone who really enjoyed making people wait. He floated up to the center platform on some kind of anti-gravity disc, because apparently walking was too pedestrian for the Quantari. "Esteemed colleagues," he began, and I swear the lights dimmed for dramatic effect. "We gather here, as we do each cycle, to celebrate the pinnacle of intellectual achievement across our galaxy. Today, I present to you something truly special. A holographic display materialized above the platform, showing what looked like a three-dimensional nightmare of symbols, numbers, and shapes that seemed to shift and rotate in ways that made my eyes hurt. "Behold," Krell announced, with the energy of someone unveiling the universe's most impressive magic trick, "the impossible cascade." Dramatic pause. The other aliens leaned forward. Someone gasped. It was very theatrical. Gasp. For 600 standard cycles, this logic puzzle has remained unsolved across known space. Civilizations have dedicated entire research institutes to cracking its secrets. The greatest minds of 1,000 worlds have attempted, and failed, to find its solution. Thorquin leaned over and whispered, "This is actually true. My species spent 2 centuries on this thing, nearly started a civil war over it. Until," Krell continued, somehow making one word sound like an entire victory speech, "the Quantari Collective applied our superior cognitive processing. After 400 cycles of rigorous analysis, we discovered the one, singular, perfect solution. The hologram shifted, showing what I assumed was the answer. It looked like someone had taught mathematics to have an anxiety attack. One solution, Krell repeated, letting that sink in. Exactly one. The puzzle is designed with such exquisite precision that only a single logical pathway leads to resolution. It is, quite simply, the ultimate test of pure reasoning. Scholar Plix clicked their mandibles respectfully. The Chitauri Confederacy attempted this puzzle for 90 cycles. We concluded it was unsolvable. Your achievement is most impressive, Prime Logician. My people tried the direct approach, Thorquin admitted, sounding almost embarrassed. Applied every battle strategy we know. Nothing. I will say, it was humbling. Other representatives started chiming in with their own stories of failure. The Veldrani spent decades on it. The Morphic Collective created an entire subspecies just to think about this puzzle. Everyone had tried. Everyone had failed. Everyone except the smug crystal mantis up front. We present this, Krell said, not to boast, but to demonstrate that with sufficient cognitive evolution, even the impossible becomes merely difficult. Perhaps in time, younger species will develop the necessary mental frameworks to appreciate such elegance. He looked directly at me when he said younger species. I was only half paying attention, honestly. I'd been doodling on my datapad, trying to figure out if the summit was going to have decent food or if I'd be stuck eating whatever passed for cuisine when your hosts were crystalline and probably photosynthesized. The hologram rotated again, showing the puzzle from different angles. Krell was explaining something about dimensional logic substrates and quantum probability matrices and a bunch of other words that sounded important. And that's when I saw it. Well, them, actually. I tilted my head, squinting at the display. Then I pulled up my datapad and started sketching. The puzzle had this structure, right? But if you rotated the perspective and applied a different logical framework, then actually there was another way through. And if you ignored the dimensional constraints and just treated it like a flat problem, there was another solution. And if you applied emotional logic, which shouldn't work but technically could if you Mr. Foster. I looked up. Krell was staring at me with what I was pretty sure was irritation. I apologize if our intellectual discourse is boring you, he said, dripping with sarcasm. Perhaps you'd prefer to return to your quarters and rest. I understand humans require frequent mental breaks. Oh no, sorry, I said, looking back at my datapad. I was just working on the puzzle. Wanted to see if I could follow your logic. Thorquin made a choking sound. Plix's eyes all widened. Simultaneously. Krell's crystalline face did something complicated. You were working on it? Yeah, while you were talking. It's pretty interesting, actually. I looked up at the hologram again. I found 12 solutions so far. Are there more? I feel like I'm missing some obvious ones. The entire room went silent. And I mean, you could have heard a pin drop in vacuum kind of silent. Krell's crystalline body did something I didn't know was possible. It sort of flickered, like a computer screen having a minor seizure. I'm sorry, he said, in a voice that suggested he was definitely not sorry and definitely thought he'd misheard. Did you just claim to have found 12 solutions? Yeah, I said, looking back at my datapad to double-check. 12. Well, 11 and a half if we're being technical. Number 8 is kind of cheating because it relies on a logical paradox, but it does resolve the puzzle, so I counted it. That is impossible, Krell said flatly. The impossible. Cascade has one solution. 1. We spent 400 cycles confirming this mathematical certainty. Right, but see, that's only if you approach it from a Quantari logical framework. I stood up, bringing my datapad to the center platform because apparently I was doing this now. You guys think in crystalline logic patterns, right? Very rigid, very precise, very symmetrical. Which is great, don't get me wrong. But it also means you're locked into one way of seeing the problem. I gestured at the hologram. Solution 1 is yours. Beautiful, elegant, perfect. No notes. But solution 2 is what happens if you apply lateral thinking and ignore the dimensional constraints entirely. You're thinking three-dimensionally, but the puzzle doesn't actually require that. Plix scuttled forward, all their eyes focusing on my datapad. Show me. I pulled up my sketch. See? If you flatten it into a two-dimensional problem and rotate the logic chain, you get a completely different pathway that arrives at the same resolution point. By the ancestors, Plix whispered. He's right. The mathematics, they work. Coincidence, Krell said, but his voice had lost some of its smugness. Continue. Okay, so solution 3 uses quantum probability logic. Instead of finding the one correct path, you treat all paths as simultaneously correct, until observation collapses them. Schrodinger's puzzle solution, basically. Thorquin leaned forward, his massive frame almost knocking over his chair. What about battle strategy? My people tried every tactical approach. Oh yeah, solution 4 is pure strategic thinking, I said, pulling up another sketch. Your people were trying to defeat the puzzle. But if you treat it as an opponent, you need to outmaneuver rather than overcome, and apply a flanking logic pattern. You can actually root around the hard parts entirely. Thorquin stared at my datapad. Then he stood up, walked over, and made a sound like a growling laugh. This is Draknor, warrior philosophy, the path of the clever strike. We use this in space combat. How did we not see this? Because you were looking at a puzzle, not a battle, I said with a shrug. Context matters. Krell's crystals were definitely flickering now. And the other 8 solutions? Right. Okay, so 5 is recursive paradox loops. 6 is emotional logic, which I know sounds insane, but if you assign empathetic values to the logic nodes and let them interact based on relationship dynamics, it actually resolves correctly. 7 uses music theory, because the puzzle has a harmonic structure if you convert the math to frequencies. 8 is the paradox one I mentioned. 9 applies linguistic grammar rules as if the puzzle is a sentence. 10 uses chaos theory, and just lets random perturbations guide the path. 11 is pure brute force combinatorics, very inelegant but technically valid. And 12, I paused, pulling up the last sketch. 12 uses childlike simplicity. My nephew is 7, right? And he does this thing where if something looks complicated, he just ignores all the scary parts and focuses on what makes sense to him. So I tried that. Ignored about 90% of the puzzle's complexity and just solved the core problem. Works perfectly. The room had gone from silent to absolutely frozen. Even the hologram seemed to have stopped rotating. Scholar Plick suddenly made a high-pitched chittering sound. Solution 6, the emotional logic one. Run it through the Chitauri physics framework. Now, another alien, some kind of floating jellyfish creature, manipulated the hologram. Numbers cascaded across the display. Impossible, the jellyfish breathed. This just solved the Chitauri unified field problem. We've been working on this for 300 cycles. Let me see solution 4 again, Thorquin demanded, grabbing my datapad with surprising gentleness for someone with claws the size of my head. He stared at it. His eyes widened. This is the lost stratagem of Warlord Krethix. We thought it was a myth. This proves it was real tactical theory. More aliens were crowding around now, all checking my math, running simulations, arguing in dozens of languages while their translators struggled to keep up. Krell just stood there on his floating platform, looking like someone had told him the universe was actually a cube. I don't understand, he finally said. And for the first time, he didn't sound smug. He sounded genuinely lost. How did you, in 20 minutes, find 12 solutions to a puzzle that has stumped galactic civilization for 6 centuries? I scratched the back of my head, feeling suddenly very awkward about all the attention. I mean, I only had 20 minutes, I said apologetically. If I'd had more time, I probably could have found the obvious ones I missed. Sorry about that. The thing about breaking someone's entire worldview is that they don't usually handle it gracefully. Krell was experiencing what I can only describe as a real-time existential meltdown. His crystalline body was flickering between about 7 different colors, which according to Plix's hasty whisper meant he was cycling through shock, disbelief, anger, confusion, and something the translator called cognitive reorganization anxiety. Run them again, Krell said, his voice tight. All 12. There must be an error, a miscalculation, some fundamental flaw in the human's reasoning that our systems will identify. The jellyfish alien, who I learned was called High Computation Velis, was already on it. The hologram exploded into 12 separate displays, each one showing a different solution pathway through the impossible cascade. Numbers streamed past faster than I could read, each calculation being verified, cross-referenced, and stress-tested against every known mathematical framework. I stood there awkwardly, wondering if I should sit back down or if that would be weird now that everyone was staring at. My work, like I'd just proven the universe, ran on AA batteries. Solution 1. Verified, Velis announced, their gelatinous form pulsing. Matches Quantari original. Solution 2. Verified. Dimensional reduction is valid. Solution 3. Verified. Quantum superposition logic is disturbing, but mathematically sound. 4. Verified, Thorquin growled, still staring at my datapad like it was the most beautiful thing he'd ever seen. Strategic flanking logic. By the ancestors, it's perfect. We've been teaching this to our warriors for millennia, and we never thought to apply it here. Krell made a sound like crystal scraping against crystal. This cannot be happening. Solution 5. Verified. Velis continued, completely ignoring Krell's crisis. Recursive paradox loops create stable solution. Solution 6. Verified. And as Scholar Plix noted, it accidentally resolves a separate physics problem. Solution 7. Verified. The harmonic resonance approach is actually quite elegant. Wait, go back to 6. Someone else called out. It was a representative from the Nautilian collective, a species that looked like someone had given sentience to a particularly intellectual starfish. If emotional logic works here, then that means the Gordath theorem was wrong. We built an entire branch of science on the Gordath theorem. The Gordath theorem was apparently very wrong, Velis said, not unkindly. Solution 6 proves that subjective emotional values can create objective logical frameworks under specific conditions. Your entire collective will need to, well, reassess some things. The Nautilian made a bubbling sound that the translator rendered as, "Oh dear." Solutions 8 through 11, all verified. Velis continued. 8 is philosophically questionable but mathematically valid. 9's linguistic approach is bizarre but functional. 10's chaos theory method shouldn't work but does. 11 is brute force, but undeniably correct. Krell's color had settled on, something between dark purple and the shade of someone's pride dying in real time. And solution 12, Velis said, with what I swear was admiration in their voice, is perhaps the most remarkable. By ignoring the puzzle's intentional complexity and solving only the core logical structure, the human has demonstrated that 90% of the impossible cascade's difficulty was, essentially, decorative. Decorative, Krell repeated, his voice hollow. We spent 600 years, a reptilian alien said slowly, standing up from their seat, intimidated by a puzzle that was mostly just showing off. The room erupted. And I don't mean polite academic discourse erupted. I mean chaos. Pure, unfiltered, intellectual chaos. A group of morphic collective representatives started arguing loudly about how many resources they'd wasted creating specialized thinking subspecies. The Veldrani delegate was demanding to know why their computational matrices hadn't identified the lateral thinking approach. Thorquin was trying to call someone on his communicator, shouting about how this changed everything they knew about tactical philosophy. Plix grabbed my arm with one of their many legs. Jake Foster, do you understand what you've done? You've just invalidated 6 centuries of assumed limitations. Species have built their entire intellectual identities around having failed this puzzle. I really didn't mean to, I said, genuinely apologetic. I thought I was just, double-checking the math. The human is correct about one thing, Krell said suddenly, his voice cutting through the noise. Everyone went quiet. He floated down from his platform, approaching me directly. Up close, he was even more intimidating, but his flickering had stopped. He just looked tired. If these 12 solutions exist, and they are all valid, then the puzzle's fundamental premise was flawed. We assumed one solution because finding one solution was so difficult, Velis added, floating. Closer. We stopped looking. We celebrated the discovery and declared victory. But humans, Plix chittered excitedly, all their eyes focusing on me. Humans don't stop, do they? Your species doesn't know when something is supposed to be impossible. Well, I said, shifting uncomfortably. I mean, we do. We just sort of ignore it and try anyway. It's kind of a species-wide character flaw, honestly. Thorquin laughed, a deep booming sound. A flaw? This is a strength. My people respect strength, and cognitive fearlessness is a form of strength. He turned to address the room. The Draknor Confederacy formally recognizes that we have been thinking like cowards. We approached this puzzle with too much respect. The Chitauri agree, Plix said. We were so concerned with following proper scientific methodology that we never considered improper methodology might work better. More species started chiming in. This weird cascade of civilizations, all simultaneously realizing they'd been thinking inside boxes they'd built themselves. Krell raised one of his crystalline limbs, and everyone quieted again. He looked at me, and I honestly couldn't read his expression, but his color had shifted to something lighter, almost clear. Jake Foster, he said formally, the Quantari Collective acknowledges that our understanding of the impossible cascade was incomplete. Your cognitive approach is unusual, chaotic, seemingly random. He paused, and undeniably effective. Thanks, I said, because I wasn't sure if that was a compliment or an insult. Again, I'm really sorry if I messed something up. I know this puzzle was kind of a big deal for you guys. Messed something up, Krell repeated, and then did something I didn't expect. He laughed. It sounded like wind chimes in a tornado, but it was definitely a laugh. Yes, human. You have thoroughly messed something up. You've messed up our assumptions, our methodologies, and our pride. He gestured at the 12 solution displays, still floating in the hologram. But perhaps that is exactly what we needed. If I thought the room was chaotic before, it was nothing compared to what happened next. The summit, which was supposed to be a dignified showcase of intellectual achievement, had essentially turned into the galaxy's biggest, "oh crap, we've been doing it wrong" convention. Species were frantically pulling up their own unsolved problems. Representatives were arguing with their homeworlds via communicator, and someone had started crying. I think. It was hard to tell with the Gelatari, since they were already mostly liquid. Everyone, please. Velis tried to restore order, their form pulsing with what I assumed was stress. We must approach this systematically. The human has demonstrated a new problem-solving paradigm. We should document this, create frameworks, establish protocols. Forget protocols, shouted a 6-armed creature from the Hexian aggregate. I'm sending Foster's 12 solutions to our research institute right now. Do you know how many problems are structured similarly? Hundreds. We could have breakthroughs by next cycle. Krell had moved to the side of the room, consulting with other Quantari representatives who had apparently joined via hologram. I caught snippets of their conversation. Words like fundamental reassessment and cognitive flexibility studies, and how did we miss this for 400 years? Meanwhile, I was being absolutely mobbed. Mr. Foster, a floating brain in a containment jar said, hovering uncomfortably close to my face. The Cerebral Collective would like to study your neural patterns. We'll pay handsomely. We have 17 unsolvable problems that are probably actually just us being too rigid. I don't think you can study my brain, I said, leaning back. I'm pretty sure I need it. Non-invasive scanning only, the brain assured me. Mostly non-invasive. Somewhat non-invasive. Absolutely not, Thorquin said physically, inserting himself between me and the brain jar. The human helped my people rediscover lost tactical knowledge. He is under Draknor protection now. This means something. It means he should be helping the Chitauri first, Plix argued, scuttling around to my other side. We have 300 years of backed-up physics problems, and he already solved one accidentally. Imagine what he could do on purpose. I really don't think I can just solve everyone's problems, I protested, but nobody was listening. A delegation from the Prismatic Assembly approached, their crystalline forms refracting light in dizzying patterns. Our people have been working on chromatic logic harmonics for 2 centuries. Your Solution 7, the musical theory approach, suggests we've been thinking about it wrong. Could you consult? I don't even know what chromatic logic harmonics are, I said. Perfect, the prismatic leader said. Your ignorance may be exactly what we need. Fresh perspective. This was getting out of hand. More species kept approaching. The Veldrani wanted me to look at their computational architecture. The Morphic Collective wanted to know if their thinking subspecies were even necessary, or if they'd just been overcomplicating things for generations. Someone from a species I hadn't even been introduced to offered me what the translator called significant breeding rights, which I declined so fast I nearly gave myself whiplash. Please, I said, raising my voice to be heard over the crowd. I'm not some kind of problem-solving genius. I'm just an engineer who fixes coffee makers. I got lucky with the puzzle. Luck? Krell's voice cut through the noise. He'd returned from his consultation, and his color had settled into something that looked almost resigned. Mr. Foster, I've been reviewing your methodology with my colleagues. What you did was not luck. He gestured, and the hologram shifted to show my 12 solutions again, but this time with annotations in Quantari script. You applied 12 completely different logical frameworks in the span of 20 minutes. Do you understand how remarkable that is? Most species develop one primary mode of thinking and refine it over millennia. You casually switched between dimensional thinking, quantum logic, emotional reasoning, strategic planning, chaos theory, and what you called childlike simplicity, as if changing mental paradigms was as simple as changing clothing. I mean, isn't it? I asked. The room went quiet again. No, Mr. Foster, Krell said slowly. For the rest of us, it very much is not. Plix chittered thoughtfully. Human cognitive architecture must be fundamentally different. More flexible, more chaotic. Yes, but chaos that can be directed. It's like you think in multiple simultaneous frameworks, and just pick whichever one seems interesting. That sounds exhausting, Velis said. It is exhausting, I confirmed. Do you know how hard it is for humans to focus? We have Entire industries built around helping people concentrate on one thing at a time. But that cognitive chaos, Thorquin rumbled, that inability to stay locked in one mode of thinking, it means you see solutions the rest of us cannot. We are specialized. You are adaptable. The Quantari Collective spent 400 years refining our crystalline logic, Krell said, and he actually sounded almost humble. We became so refined, so perfect in our methodology, that we lost the ability to think any other way. We optimized ourselves into a corner. He looked around the room at the assembled species. I suspect we all did. That landed like a meteor. So what do we do? Asked the Nautilian representative, their starfish arms waving. Restructure our entire civilization's approach to problem solving? Yes, Krell said simply. Or at least consider it. The human has shown us that cognitive diversity isn't a weakness. It's possibly the greatest strength a problem solver can have. I'm going to cause so many arguments back home, someone muttered. Good, Thorquin said. Arguments mean progress. Stagnation is death. I was about to say something, probably something about how I really just wanted to go back to my hotel room and maybe process the fact that I'd apparently caused a galaxy-wide intellectual crisis, when the hologram started flashing. Incoming solutions, Velis announced. Species are using Foster's frameworks and finding new solutions to the impossible cascade. Current count, 17, 19, 24. They're accelerating. What? I said. Your 12 solutions created templates, Plix explained excitedly. Other species are now applying your methods to find even more solutions. The puzzle doesn't have one answer. It has potentially infinite answers depending on your approach. 37 solutions now. Velis updated. 42. This is unprecedented. Krell made that wind chime laugh again. The impossible cascade. We should rename it. Perhaps the infinite cascade. Or better yet, the humbling. I vote for the humbling, Thorquin said. More numbers kept climbing. 50 solutions. 60. Species were competing now, trying to find the most elegant or creative solutions. The summit had transformed from a formal presentation into something like a galaxy-wide puzzle-solving party, and everyone wanted to talk to me about it. Mr. Foster. A new alien approached, this one looking like a floating geometric shape. The axiom concordat has 47 unsolved mathematical proofs. Would you be willing to? I think the human needs rest, Plix interrupted, all their eyes focusing protectively on me. He's been solving our problems. Perhaps we should solve one of his. I'd like to leave, I said quietly. Is that solvable? Thorquin laughed and literally picked me up, setting me on his shoulder. The human is under Draknor protection and requires respite. Anyone who bothers him answers to me. He started walking toward the exit, and the crowd actually parted. Apparently, 7 feet of Dragon Warrior Diplomat was effective at crowd control. Thank you, I said. Thank you, Jake Foster, Thorquin rumbled. You gave my people back a piece of our history. That is worth protecting. As we left the symposium hall, I could still hear the chaos behind us. Species arguing, discoveries being announced, the number of solutions still climbing. I'd come here as a backup, a substitute, a guy who fixed coffee makers. I was leaving as the human who accidentally proved the galaxy's smartest species had been overthinking everything for 600 years. Honestly, I preferred the coffee maker thing. 3 days later, I was finally on the transport ship heading back to Earth, and I'd never been so happy to see the inside of a cramped human-designed spacecraft in my entire life. The past 72 hours had been, to put it mildly, absolutely unhinged. After Thorquin had extracted me from the summit, I'd naively assumed things would calm down, that I could just lie low in my quarters, maybe order some room service, and wait out the rest of the conference like a normal person who hadn't accidentally destabilized galactic intellectual paradigms. I was wrong. So very wrong. First, the Quantari had asked me to give an informal talk about human problem-solving methodologies. Informal, they said. It'll be casual, they said. I showed up to find an auditorium with 4,000 aliens and a stage that was apparently being broadcast to 17 different star systems. I spent 2 hours trying to explain that humans didn't really have a methodology. We just kind of threw ideas at problems until something stuck, and I'm pretty sure I caused 3 separate philosophical crises in the audience. Then the interview requests started. Galactic news networks, academic journals, something called the Infinite Thought Collective, that I'm still not entirely sure was real or some kind of elaborate prank. Everyone wanted to know the secret to human cognitive flexibility. I kept telling them there was no secret, that humans were just really good at being confused and trying stuff anyway. but apparently that answer was itself profound. Which was confusing, which apparently proved their point. Thorquin had actually followed through on the protection thing, and assigned me a Draknor guard named Crixus, who took his duty very seriously. At one point, a particularly aggressive research team from the Cerebral Collective tried to corner me in a hallway, and Crixus literally roared at them. I didn't even know alien brains in jars could run away, but they managed it. The worst part, though, was the honorary titles. The Draknor Confederacy officially declared me Blade of Unconventional Thought, which came with a ceremonial weapon I wasn't allowed to take on the transport. The Chitauri made me an honorary Nest Thinker, which apparently was a huge deal and involved a ceremony where I had to wear a hat made of biomechanical sensors. The Quantari, in what I think was Krell's version of apologizing for being condescending, named me a crystalline logic disruptor, which sounded way cooler than it actually was. Plix had insisted on writing a paper about me, titled Cognitive Chaos Theory: How Human Neural Architecture Enables Multi-Framework Problem Solving Through Systematic Unsystematic Thinking. I'd read the abstract. I didn't understand the abstract. Plix assured me that was perfect and proved their thesis. And then, on my last night there, Krell had actually sought me out. I'd been in my quarters, packing what little stuff I'd brought, when he'd appeared at my door. His crystalline form was a calm, clear color I hadn't seen before. "Mr. Foster," he'd said, "may I speak with you?" "Sure," I'd said, because what else do you say to the alien who you'd accidentally humiliated in front of the entire galaxy? He'd come inside, moving with a grace that seemed almost hesitant. "I wanted to apologize," he'd said, which was the last thing I'd expected. "I treated you with condescension when you arrived. I assumed your species was intellectually inferior because you were different from us. That was wrong." "Hey, no worries," I'd said, uncomfortable with the whole thing. "I mean, I kind of am intellectually inferior. I barely passed calculus. You solved a 600-year-old puzzle in 20 minutes using 12 different logical frameworks," Krell had said dryly. "I suspect your definition of intellectual inferiority may need adjustment." He'd paused, his form flickering slightly. "The Quantari built our entire civilization on the idea that there is always one perfect answer, one optimal solution. Crystalline logic, we call it. Pure, clear, singular. You showed us that this belief was limiting us. I mean, crystalline logic is still valid," I'd offered. "It was solution one. It worked." "Yes, but it was only one of infinite possibilities." Krell had made a sound like chimes in a soft breeze. "We mistook refinement for superiority. We became so precise that we lost flexibility. Your species, humanity, you never refined your thinking. You kept it messy and chaotic and adaptable. That is not a weakness. That is wisdom we lacked." "I think you're giving us too much credit," I'd said. "Humans are mostly just winging it." "Precisely," Krell had said, and I swear he'd sounded almost envious. "The confidence to, as you say, wing it, is something the Quantari lost millennia ago. Perhaps we can learn it again." He'd left shortly after, but not before informing me that I'd been invited to return next year as the summit's keynote speaker. Keynote. Me. The guy who fixed coffee makers. I'd politely said I'd think about it, by which I meant I was going to think very hard about how to avoid it. Now, sitting in my cabin on the transport, I pulled up my personal messages and immediately regretted it. 2,347. Unread messages. I scrolled through them with mounting horror. Research institutes, universities, governments, someone from the Prismatic Assembly asking if I could help with their chromatic logic problem. 3 different species offering me consulting positions. The Morphic Collective asking if I could review their subspecies creation protocols. A message from the Axiom Concordat with the subject line, 47 unsolved proofs, please help, we're desperate. And at the bottom, marked urgent, a message from Earth Science Council. I opened it reluctantly. "Mr. Foster, we've been informed of your achievements at the Galactic Intelligence Summit. We would like to formally debrief you upon your return and discuss potential roles in Earth's Diplomatic Science Division. Also, Dr. Vasquez would like to speak with you. She seems upset that she missed the summit due to food poisoning. Please respond at your earliest convenience." Great. Elena was going to kill me. She'd spent her entire career trying to get humanity taken seriously by the galactic community, and I'd apparently done it by accident while she was home with stomach problems. I closed the messages and opened a new log entry, because apparently, I was supposed to document this trip for Earth's records. Personal log, Jake Foster, Day 6 of the Intelligence Summit trip, I said, recording. So, I accidentally proved that the galaxy's smartest species have been overthinking problems for centuries. The impossible cascade puzzle thing turned out to have infinite solutions. Not one, I found 12. Other species found a bunch more. Current count is over 200 and still climbing. Everyone's very excited about it. I paused, trying to figure out how to explain the rest. The aliens they're really weird about thinking inside boxes. Like, they build these incredibly sophisticated mental frameworks, and then just stay in them forever. Humans apparently don't do that. We just jump between different ways of thinking without really noticing, which I guess makes us good at solving stuff that stumps everyone else. I looked out the viewport at the stars streaking past. They want me to come back next year as a keynote speaker, which is terrifying because I barely understand what I did this year. Krell apologized for being condescending, which was nice. Thorquin gave me a sword. Plix wrote a paper about my brain. It's been a weird week. I was about to end the log when my datapad chimed. Another message. I opened it without thinking. It was from some species I'd never heard of, the Dimensional Scholars Enclave. The message was short. Mr. Foster, we have been working on a spatial temporal logic problem for 400 years with no progress. Attached is the problem structure. Any insight would be appreciated. We are willing to negotiate substantial compensation. I opened the attachment out of curiosity. It was a complex three-dimensional diagram with notation I didn't recognize. I stared at it for maybe 30 seconds. Oh, I said out loud. That's just a perspective problem. If you rotate it and apply non-linear time flow, the solution is, wait. I grabbed my datapad stylus and started sketching. 1 solution, 2 solutions, 3 solutions. No, I muttered, working faster. This isn't hard. There's at least, let me check the recursive loops. Okay, there's maybe 8 solutions here? 9 if you count the probability approach. I finished sketching and sat back, looking at what I'd just done. I'd done it again. I'd accidentally solved another unsolvable problem. In under 5 minutes, while just trying to pass time on a spaceflight. Oh no, I said. My datapad chimed again, and again, and again. More problems, more species, more impossible puzzles that had stumped civilizations. I opened one at random. Some kind of biomathematical equation from the Nautilian collective. I looked at it, tilted my head. Applied musical theory because the equation had a rhythm to it. That's just a harmonic progression, I said to the empty cabin. The solution is, oh come on, this is in the structure itself if you just, I solved it. 4 possible approaches. 3 minutes. Another message. Another problem. This one from the Hexian aggregate about quantum entanglement patterns. They're thinking about it backwards, I realized, already sketching. If you flip the observation bias and apply emotional logic to the entanglement itself, treating the particles like they're having a relationship rather than just being connected, then, yeah, there we go. Solved. I was 3 problems deep into what was apparently going to be my flight home routine when I realized what was happening. I'm going to cause another incident, I said to myself. I'm going to land on Earth with solutions to like 50 galactic problems, and Elena is definitely going to kill me. I looked at the growing list of solved problems on my datapad, then at the 2,000 unread messages, then at my reflection in the dark viewport, where I could see a guy who'd left Earth as a backup engineer and was coming home as apparently the galaxy's go-to guy for impossible problems. I just wanted a free space vacation, I said miserably. My datapad chimed again. This time it was from Krell. Mr. Foster, I am forwarding you a problem the Quantari have struggled with for 200 years. I suspect you will find it trivial. I am no longer certain whether this possibility fills me with hope or dread. Perhaps both. Safe travels. Attached was what looked like the most complicated crystalline logic structure I'd ever seen. I looked at it for 10 seconds. It's symmetrical, I said. That's the whole problem. They built it too perfectly. If you break the symmetry and introduce controlled chaos, the system actually, oh, for crying out loud, I solved it. 6 different ways, including one that used the Draknor battle strategy from the Cascade puzzle. I sent the solutions back to Krell with a message. Sorry, couldn't help myself. Yes, they all work. No, I don't know how I knew that. Human brain, I guess? His response came back almost immediately. Humanity is either the galaxy's greatest gift or most elaborate cosmic joke. I have not decided which. Thank you for the solutions. The Quantari Collective is having a collective existential crisis. It is oddly refreshing. I laughed to spite myself, then pulled up my log entry again. Update to previous log, I recorded. I've accidentally solved 3 more impossible problems during the flight home, possibly 9, depending on how you count variations. I've received consultation requests from 47 different species. The Dimensional Scholars Enclave just offered me what the translator calls extreme wealth and cultural significance to join their research division. I paused, then added, I fix coffee makers. I fixed the one on Space Station Meridian with duct tape and spite. That's my actual skill set. But apparently, the galaxy's most advanced civilizations need a guy who thinks about problems the same way most people think about jigsaw puzzles. Like there's probably multiple ways to put it together, and none of them are wrong if they work. I ended the recording and settled back in my seat, watching Earth grow larger in the viewport. Somewhere behind me, the galaxy was still solving the impossible cascade, still finding new solutions, still arguing about what it all meant. And somewhere in my datapad, I had 47 unsolved proofs from the axiom concordate that I absolutely, definitely, was not going to look at. I lasted about 20 minutes before curiosity got the better of me. Just a quick look, I told myself, opening the file. By the time we landed on Earth, I'd solved 16 of them. Elena was going to absolutely kill me. But hey, at least the coffee maker on this transport was working fine. I'd checked it 3 times. Old habits die hard.